I grew up in a modest family, raised in a cozy 3-bedroom home in a quiet suburb, where the air always carried the comforting scent of fresh laundry and my mother's home-cooked meals. My parents were simple, hardworking folks, and after high school I took on various jobs, bartending, assisting at my uncle's hardware shop, and eventually managing a small sporting goods store. It wasn't a flashy life, but it was honest and grounded. My wife, however, came from a completely different world. Her parents, let's call them Richard and Evelyn, were affluent, owning multiple properties, driving luxurious cars, and hosting grand, lavish gatherings a few times a year. Richard was a commanding presence, his words often laced with subtle threats or manipulative undertones. Evelyn, equally formidable, had a way of conveying disapproval with just a glance. A single arched brow could make anyone feel small. They were never overtly cruel to me, but their polite demeanor always masked a quiet disdain. When my wife and I got engaged, I quickly realized how fiercely her parents guarded their family's wealth. They viewed me, an outsider from a humble background, with suspicion, despite our years of dating. Before we could even set a wedding date, Richard demanded I sign a prenuptial agreement. I didn't have the resources to challenge it legally, and I was too in love to care. I told myself it was just a formality to appease them. After all, wasn't love the only commitment that mattered? The day I signed the prenup is etched in my memory. It was a warm afternoon at their sprawling mansion. Evelyn placed the document on the table, sliding a pen toward me with a practiced smile, offering me tea as if it were a casual business deal. My fiancé stood off to the side, barely speaking, which stung, but I brushed it off, convincing myself it wouldn't matter in the grand scheme. The agreement stipulated that any inheritances, gifts, or trust funds from her family would remain her sole property, but major assets acquired during the marriage, like a home or lottery winnings, would be considered marital property. That clause struck me as odd, but I was focused on marrying her, so I signed. 6 months later, we had a stunning lakeside wedding. My parents, overwhelmed by the opulence, stayed supportive, though I noticed my father's tense expression as he shook hands with my in-laws. He'd always taught me to trust my gut, but I believed love would erase any doubts. The early years of our marriage were relatively smooth. We lived in a condo her parents helped us purchase, though I made monthly mortgage payments despite their gift of the down payment. In hindsight, that gift was less about generosity and more about control. At the time, I thought that's just how wealthy families operated. We had typical spats about money and occasional frustrations when her parents meddled in our lives, showing up unannounced with new furniture, redecorating our space without asking, or making decisions for us. My wife brushed off my irritation, calling it their way of being helpful. Then everything changed. One day, my wife called me, thrilled, saying she'd won a $9 million lottery with a ticket she'd bought on a whim at a gas station. I was ecstatic, imagining quitting our jobs and traveling the world together. But my excitement faded as she grew secretive, insisting we keep the win from everyone, including my parents. She became paranoid, talking about claiming the prize properly and meeting with lawyers I'd never heard of. When I asked to join those meetings, she dismissed me, saying I'd feel out of place. That hurt deeply. The real shock came soon after. I came home exhausted from work to find her rifling through drawers with her aunt. In a cold, matter-of-fact tone, she announced she was filing for divorce and told me to pack my things and leave the condo, which she claimed was in her name. I was stunned. Yes, I'd paid toward the mortgage, but she seemed to believe her father's down payment and her new fortune gave her the right to cast me aside. My heart shattered. I called my dad, voice trembling, and told him I'd been thrown out of my own home. It felt like the ultimate betrayal. Then came the twist. I learned her father had sent his personal attorney to represent her, aiming to keep the lottery winnings out of my reach. But they'd overlooked the prenup they'd forced me to sign. Instead of fully shielding their daughter, it explicitly stated that any windfall during the marriage, like lottery winnings, was a shared asset. I realized that their rush to divorce me right after the win might backfire. I decided to tread carefully. My dad urged me to stay composed, find a lawyer outside their circle, and brace for a tough fight. I wasn't going to back down. They'd treated me like a nuisance to be discarded, but if they thought I'd walk away quietly, they were wrong. I stayed at my parents' house for a few days, reeling from the shock. My mom was livid, ranting about how my in-laws had always looked down on us. My dad, though furious, stayed practical, connecting me with a family law attorney he knew. In that lawyer's office, I felt a mix of anger and hope. I explained how my in-laws had pushed the prenup, how my wife won $9 million, and how she'd blindsided me with divorce. The attorney smirked as he read the prenup. "They've tripped over their own trap," he said. The document clearly classified lottery winnings as marital assets. Unless a judge made an unlikely ruling, I had a strong claim. The lawyer warned it wouldn't be easy. My in-laws had deep pockets and connections, likely to unleash a formidable legal team. But he was confident in our case, especially since I'd contributed financially to the marriage and been abruptly evicted. I asked about divorce proceedings in our state. A contested divorce could drag on for months, but if my wife's side realized their weak position, they might push for a quick settlement. The attorney cautioned that they'd likely use intimidation or shady tactics to pressure me into giving up my rights cheaply. Sure enough, my father-in-law left a menacing voicemail, demanding I back off, claiming I deserved nothing from his daughter. He warned that if I pursued the winnings, he'd ensure I got nothing. My lawyer told me to save every message. Then my mother-in-law confronted me outside my parents' house, offering a pitiful sum to walk away quietly. She framed it as generous, but it wouldn't even cover half my mortgage contributions. I refused, saying we'd settle it in court. She scoffed, clearly unaccustomed to being defied. With talks stalled, my lawyer filed motions to prevent the lottery funds from being hidden or transferred. That infuriated my in-laws, who began spreading rumors that I was a gold digger who'd targeted their daughter. It hurt, but I held firm. My boss at the sporting goods store stood by me, shrugging off my father-in-law's attempts to meddle with my job. Friends were divided. Some called me greedy, others cheered my resolve. The stress was crushing, but I refused to break. After weeks of failed negotiations, we got a court date. My wife was nowhere to be seen in person, shielded by her parents and their legal team. She let her attorneys speak, painting me as a freeloader who contributed little to the marriage. My lawyer countered with financial records, shared bills, and the prenup's windfall clause. We also highlighted my abrupt eviction from the condo. The judge ordered both sides to prepare for a formal hearing on asset division. In a final intimidation attempt, my father-in-law again threatened my boss, who told him to get lost. My lawyer advised caution, but was confident the judge would see through their tactics. As the hearing approached, my wife's lawyers flooded us with motions, arguing the lottery was separate property since she bought the ticket. But the prenup clearly included windfalls as marital assets. My father-in-law kept up his smear campaign, calling me a schemer who'd married for money. I stayed focused, gathering evidence, bills, mortgage payments, and texts from my wife confirming our shared expenses. My lawyer emphasized a key clause. Any financial windfalls, including lottery winnings, were marital unless explicitly excluded. It was as if my in-laws had left a loophole in their own fortress. At a preliminary conference, my wife appeared with her parents and a team of 4 lawyers plus a financial advisor. They glared at me with disdain, but their confidence wavered when my lawyer presented the prenup's windfall clause. The judge, unimpressed by their attempts to dodge it, ordered all major assets frozen until the main hearing. Outside, my mother-in-law cornered me, offering another lowball settlement and calling it generous for someone like me. I refused, saying the judge would decide. She accused me of tearing their family apart, as if I'd initiated the divorce. I stayed calm, knowing emotional outbursts could be used against me. Fearing they'd hide the lottery funds, my lawyer secured court orders to block transfers and prepared to involve a forensic accountant if needed. My father-in-law left another furious voicemail, calling me a parasite who'd ruined his daughter's life. The irony was rich. They'd orchestrated the divorce to cut me out. As the hearing neared, we rehearsed my testimony to keep it clear and factual. I had the prenup, mortgage records, and texts proving our shared life. My lawyer said to let the evidence speak and avoid their emotional theatrics. On the hearing day, my heart pounded as I stood outside the courthouse. My parents and a few friends sat in the back for support. My wife sat with her father, both stone-faced, while her mother glowered from the rear. Her lawyers in sharp suits exuded confidence, likely banking on their wealth to sway things. The judge, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s, got straight to business. My wife's team painted me as a minor contributor who'd lived off their generosity, claiming the lottery was her personal gain. My lawyer countered with the prenup's clear language and bank records showing she'd used our joint account for the ticket. When the judge asked for proof it was her separate money, they stumbled, mentioning her father's deposits. But the account was in both our names. My wife finally spoke, claiming she didn't mean to hurt me and that her parents pushed the divorce to protect the winnings. She admitted not consulting me, faltering under my lawyer's questions. The judge's disapproval was clear. By midday, the prenup's double-edged nature was undeniable. The document meant to protect them now worked against them. The judge scheduled a second hearing for final rulings, noting the lottery was likely a marital asset subject to fair division. Outside, my father-in-law muttered that this wasn't over, but his bravado was fading. In the weeks before the final verdict, their desperation grew. Their lawyers filed motions to reinterpret the prenup, claiming it wasn't meant to include lottery winnings. The judge rejected them, citing the clear text. My mother-in-law tried another confrontation, warning I'd regret crossing them. I told her they'd started this by throwing me out. My wife left a tearful voicemail, suggesting a private deal to save our relationship. But after their betrayal, lies, and intimidation, I couldn't trust her. My lawyer advised against backdoor talks. We had a strong case. At the final hearing, the courtroom buzzed with tension. My parents and friends sat quietly in support. The judge reviewed the evidence and heard final arguments. My father-in-law's team made a last-ditch effort, calling me an opportunist exploiting their generosity. My lawyer laid out the facts. They'd forced the prenup, it included windfalls as shared assets, and I'd contributed to our life, including mortgage payments. The judge also noted their attempt to evict me was unjust. In her ruling, the judge confirmed the lottery winnings were marital property per the prenup. She criticized my in-laws for trying to twist their own agreement and awarded me a significant share of the winnings, plus compensation for my condo contributions. A finalization date was set to wrap up paperwork. My father-in-law's face was stormy, my mother-in-law whispered furiously, and my wife looked tearful, whether from guilt or anger I couldn't tell. I felt both triumph and sorrow. We'd once loved each other, but greed and her parents' influence had destroyed it. Afterward, their lawyers offered a slightly better settlement, likely hoping I'd settle to avoid hassle. My lawyer said to stick with the judge's ruling. We'd won. I only agreed to relinquish my claim to the condo. I never wanted to see it again. They issued me a substantial check, not quite half the winnings, but enough to rebuild my life comfortably. Their arrogance had backfired. The prenup they'd forced on me became my shield. They hadn't expected me to fight back, let alone win. My wife, I've heard, remains under her parents' thumb, her reputation tarnished in their social circle. Some mutual friends say she's wrestling with guilt, but I doubt she'll ever admit her family's scheming. I used part of the settlement to help my parents renovate their home as thanks for their support. I invested the rest, and though the ordeal left me wary of trust, marriage, and wealth, I'm comforted knowing I stood my ground. They tried to bully me into scraps, but I walked away with justice. Now, free from their manipulative grasp, I'm rebuilding a simpler life, much like my pre-marriage days, but wiser and stronger. If they remember me, I hope it's as the man they underestimated, who used their own weapon to secure his future. They started the battle, I finished it, and with that, this chapter closes.